There's so much to talk about with PSB in terms of its history.
It's like a family. People love the brand, they love the products, and that kind of creates this cult following.
Of course, back in those days, I would just walk in with speakers cold, say, I'm Paul Barton, I make speakers.
You know, we set them up, we listen to them, and I'm like, whoa, I don't have anything this good.
What the NRC did was systematize how satisfied listeners were with the sound of that loudspeaker.
So it was kind of a secret sauce. He was able to create these speakers at a price point which was quite significantly less than everybody else.
And imagine me going into this community of scientists, PhDs.
People were talking about this Canadian sound and this Canadian speaker design. Didn't take very long to say, yeah, this is a perfect match.
This is what really sets apart PSB, that deep understanding of the physics of sound reproduction.
When someone hears a PSB product, they know they're listening to a PSB product, from the flagship models right through to the lowest price models.
And that was Paul's thing. You know, he was out to make a natural sounding speaker. It's not an accident.
Basically, we're not resting on our laurels. We can carry that legacy of innovation into the future.
Seeing PSB take its rightful place amongst the top 5 to 10 brands in the history of hi-fi.
The end goal is the music, experiencing the music as opposed to listening.
Welcome, and thank you for joining us for PSB Speakers' 50th anniversary virtual celebrations. My name is June Ebb. I'm VP of Marketing for PSB Speakers, and we have a full slate of activities for you for the next hour, including a sneak preview of a full-length documentary that we've created just for this occasion. Right at the start of this segment, you saw a trailer. It was just a taste, and if you wait till the very end, you'll get to see the full 23 minutes. We've also got some great door prizes from, of course, PSB Speakers, and some of our friends, including Blue Sound and ISO Acoustics. We'll get a chance to get to know the rest of the PSB team, as well as have a Q&A with Paul Barton himself. The Q&A will be moderated by Doug Schneider. He's the founder of SoundStage, a Canadian audio magazine, and he's the perfect moderator for this session because he first owned PSBs as a teenager in 1980. They were the new Avantes, in case anybody remembered those. Paul also showed him the ropes of speaker measurements at the NRC, as Doug was eager to include speaker measurements in his reviews of speakers. And so they have a long history together and they have a really strong friendship, and we're very happy to have him on board. And with that, I'll throw it to Doug and Paul.
Hi, welcome to the PSB live event for the 50th anniversary of the brand. I'm here with legendary speaker designer Paul Barton, of course. And before I get to a question for him, I want to tell you that he will be doing live question and answers, so submit them in the chat area below. That'll be a little later in the program. Also, you can join the conversation on this on any social media channel at hashtag PSB50, and then there's at PSB Speakers on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Sign up for their feeds. So we're gonna start right now with me asking Paul Barton a few questions. Now, first question is, a lot has been made about NRC, Canada's National Research Council. And you've been going there for 50 years. Out of your time at NRC, what was the most valuable experience or experiences there?
Well, of course, it's a facility. Hi, everyone. It's a facility that was second to none, as I realized later on in doing this kind of measurement of loudspeakers. But more importantly, it was the environment that was surrounding the acoustics division. Of course, keep in mind that NRC is a government-funded institution, like a think tank, that employs about 1,000 PhDs in the sciences. And within that group of scientists, there is an acoustics division which studied, human hearing, psychoacoustics.
And the whole place is like a university campus.
Yeah, and it has about 65 buildings. But the two areas I'm talking about are the anechoic chamber, which is where we do the measurements of the speakers, and then the listening room and the acoustics wing, which employed several PhDs specializing in acoustics. And one of the great benefits I found in that environment, as opposed to going to university and studying all this stuff, was when I was designing loudspeakers, I'd be in the chamber doing some work, and then over the intercom, because all these rooms and labs were joined by an intercom system, you know, at 10:30 every morning, I'd go to NRC and spend about a week, sometimes longer. So every day at about 10:30 and again at 2:30 in the afternoon, you would hear someone come on the phone and say, "Coffee's ready." So it was sort of a tradition where I would wander over to the M36 where the acoustics wing was, and I was able to sit down and rub shoulders with not only Dr. Floyd Toole, who basically was my mentor and who introduced me to all of this, but all of his colleagues as well. And you know, we'd sit around the lunchroom table drinking coffee, and they would answer questions and I would inquire and I would hear what they're talking about. And that to me was so exciting, to, you know, wait for that coffee's ready in the afternoon and in the morning, and looking forward to having rubbed shoulders with
And
these.
you could learn directly the things you needed to know by asking the people.
Oh, I
who
would
are
be telling them
experts.
what my experiences were, what challenges I was finding, and all of them would be very open and helpful. That was an exciting time for me.
And I can understand that, because one of the things I tend to do as a reviewer, and I recommend other reviewers do it, is to go to people like you. Hey, I got a question about a loudspeaker. How does this work? How does that work? Go to the people who know.
Yeah, and you do that.
I do
often.
that. I do that often.
We talk a lot.
We do, actually. I still see you, Paul, every few weeks, and I bring a coffee down to NRC, and we usually end up talking about speaker design.
Yeah.
So let's move to speaker design. After 50 years, what is your favorite, let's call it a topology or configuration or whatever, design a speaker, what do you like to see it have?
I think the most elegant execution of a design is what we have standing here right now.
This is the T600.
Yeah, and this is evolved from in the beginning with the synchrony, where I used multiple woofers with a mid-range and tweeter.
And the mid-range over the tweeter is kind of a hallmark now.
That's right, and I explained that the way because they're not coincident, the way the sound radiates out of these, there's a position up and down where they're not the same at the crossover frequency, where both share the same frequency. But let me explain that at low frequencies, all three woofers produce the lowest frequencies together.
To get the most bass power.
Right, the most surface area. In fact, this is somewhat equivalent to maybe a 10-inch or more woofer, or 12-inch woofer, in terms of its surface area. But it's slim and in a small, but it's also spread out over quite a large area. So the bottom woofer rolls off, like I said, they all produce the lowest frequencies. The bottom woofer rolls off at around 100 hertz.
So out of the mid-range
It's only doing subwoofing. And then this one rolls off at about 250 hertz, and this one rolls off at about 500, where it then crosses over to the mid-range.
And only this one is crossing over to the mid-range.
That's right, so that you don't get a lot of interference at frequencies, at the distances these are relative to the wavelength of, say, 500 hertz, which is about 6 inches. That means that things are relatively close, and you get good blending and good directivity if you cross it over at the right frequency and you only have one driver crossing over to the other. So this is kind of the classic, and this approach is something that PSB is going to be known for and has been known for.
Because a lot of people might think this is a traditional three-way.
No.
But it's really more like a five-way.
We call it a five-way transitional design.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, now let's talk a little bit, not about the history of PSB speakers, but the name. P&B stands for Paul Barton, and many people assume that the S is your middle name, but it's not.
No. S stands for my wife, Sue, who is we are high school sweethearts. I met her when I was 16 years old. And in fact, I designed that very first PSB logo with a Data 70 type font, which I did and designed in a common class that Sue and I had was a geography class, and I designed that logo. And I can honestly say that she deserves to be in that position, because in the early days, you know, she got out of school a year earlier than I did, because she was in a 4-year course. I was in a 5-year course. And when she left school, she started her career in cosmetics. And so she was the breadwinner for several years. And so
when you were building
when
PSB
we were
up.
starting to build PSB up, you know, we didn't have a lot of money. It was a ground-up company starting from scratch. And if I had more time, I could tell you a little bit more about those things in those days. But well-deserved position in the logo, PSB.
And I came into some knowledge recently. You have a 70s era product called the Beta 2.
That's right.
Her
Well, it was
father,
very
your
early-
father-in-law,
My father-in-law.
had a design aspect to that.
Well, yeah, he was a commercial artist who drew that rendering of the Beta 2 and signed it his name, James Manley, and worked with us for years when he worked with Davis and Henderson, designing our brochures and supporting the brand. And so there's a real family tie when it comes to PSB and the beginnings of PSB.
PSB, now everyone should know what that means.
Yeah.
So finally, let's also talk about a little back in time, but current time. Subwoofers are everywhere. Home theater made them big.
Mm-hmm.
But you were doing subwoofers back in the 70s for music when hardly anyone was. You were kind of a pioneer in subwoofer technology for subsat systems. Can you elaborate a bit on your work there?
Yeah, in those days, the beginnings of subwoofers as parts of systems. In fact, the very first subwoofer system that I was introduced to was when I first met Dr. Floyd Toole. When he lived in Ottawa before he moved to Manotick, he had a home, and he actually built a 15-inch subwoofer in his 2-channel system, which he had wall-mounted, the left and right speaker, and put the subwoofer in a step-down family room, and he put the subwoofer right firing into the basement. So the basement was the enclosure. And he had in his chair, because the subwoofer was right beside it, the ability to control the volume of the subwoofer. And that really intrigued me, you know, adding that other element to a system and taking all the low frequency away from your left and right speakers that have to stereo image and not create Doppler distortion because of the excursion of the cones. We built the very first subwoofer called the PSB subwoofer. It was an 8-inch, 2 8-inch woofers in their own enclosures, so it was a stereo sub.
Yeah.
And had a really exotic crossover, passive crossover, that in fact allowed you to change the crossover frequency to the satellite passively with a. I had these little computer edge card connectors with PCBs that you plug in and put in different positions in order to change the frequency, change the gain of the left and right speakers, and also select the sensitivity. So basically, and
that was all 70s era.
That was in the late 70s. I designed that subwoofer.
Yeah, and you brought up Dr. Floyd Toole. I know he's in this next segment. I don't know if you know about this, but some of your friends from that history of PSB have a little something to say.
Oh.
That the people are going to see, and you're going to see too.
Okay.
I'm Robert Harley, editor of the Absolute Sound magazine. I'd like to congratulate Paul, everyone at PSB, and Lenbrook on this remarkable 50-year anniversary.
Good afternoon. I'm Ken Davarsin from Kunais Electronic Bangkok. And here is my wife, Jane, and my daughter, Boom. On behalf of the company, I'd like to congratulate PSB on its 50th anniversary.
I'm Dave Morrison, president and founder of ISO Acoustics. Congratulations, Paul and PSB, on an amazing 50 years. You're a legend in Canadian audio, highly respected around the world, and a friend. Happy anniversary, and I wish you many, many more.
My name is John Tan. I was the distributor for PSB outside North America in Asia since 1989. If you recall products like PSB Stratus Gold, Stratus Silver, it has been a long journey, 33 years. I'd like to wish PSB a 50th anniversary. Happy birthday.
Hi, this is Bob Onsher from CE Pro Magazine. I'd like to wish Paul and PSB a happy 50th birthday. That means quite a lot in today's world. And it doesn't matter what product category or what industry you're in. To say that you've been around for 50 years means quite a bit. It means that people really like what you're doing.
My name is Floyd Toole, and I'm retired now, but when I met Paul Barton almost 50 years ago, I was a research scientist at the National Research Council in Ottawa, Canada. Paul has designed only good products over the years, still is. And looking back over the nearly 50 years that I've known Paul and PSB products, I can only say, congratulations, Paul and PSB, on 50 successful years. Well done.
Hello, I'm Ola Apol from Norway. I used to head up Interconnect, who worked as a distributor for various audio brands since 1989 in Norway as well as in Scandinavia. So happy to learn that PSB can celebrate 50 years anniversary. It's not a shocker. On the other side, it's an achievement rarely found in any industry. So congratulations to all of you. Paul for his skills and knowledge, Gord for his steering through rough times, and all of you good people who work daily with the PSB brand. Happy anniversary and best of luck for the next decades to come.
So we're here with 4 members of the PSB product family who are going to talk about either their favorite PSB product or PSB-based dream system. Joe, you're up.
It's tough to make a decision. I mean, I love all our children, but I'd say PWM with a performance wall mount is a dream system. It's something that I wanted when I was in the business of doing custom installation, a product that looks both beautiful and performs at the highest level. So that is the dream system for me.
It's a wall-mounted speaker.
It's a wall-mounted speaker that performs at a level that is well beyond what people expect. It's not just a pretty face. It performs at the same level that you would with the, the fetus kind of product that you'd have, high level of performance.
Okay, Agatha?
I don't think I can choose just one. In our family, I got to tell you, Doug, we love listening to music, and having worked with PSB for over 20 years, I've seen it evolve from really a brand that was focused on traditional loudspeakers and now makes, as Joe mentioned, on-wall product that fits, today's lifestyle. In-ceiling, in-wall product, product for the go, on-the-go hi-fi in our high-performance headphones. And also, I think our best-kept secret, honestly, is our outdoor speaker range. So, we're lucky to enjoy all of those in the house, although we don't always agree on the genre that's being played, and so I think I would say music throughout the home, and PSB really providing a solution for all lifestyles and all types of choices, including powered product now as well. So really the gambit.
Okay. And Gord, you're involved in some of the designs. Tell us.
And I can concur with everything Joe said about the PWM, having it in my home right now. So as currently right now, setting up a 2-channel system downstairs, and I've got my eyes on those T3s and had for years. It's like art, both in how it looks and how it sounds.
Okay. Rob, you're getting 2 questions. First, what is your favorite product, dream system, whatever?
Currently, I just set up a new listening area in my basement. So I've been using the B600s and with the M10, NAD M10.
So the PSB B600 stand mounts and the M10 from NAD.
Yes, yeah, it's just a great sounding system.
And Rob is involved with the designs directly. I often see him at NRC with Paul, sitting there helping him with the designs. Of all the speakers you've worked on with Paul, what's your favorite speaker to have designed?
Yeah, no, the ones I enjoy the most are the ones that include different technologies. Like all the all the projects do have their own fun aspects to it, but the ones that we've had to include other technologies, like say, for instance, in the Imagine XA, our Atmos elevation speaker. So we had to have it work within the Dolby guidelines for their elevation speakers, but then we also had to keep it PSB at the same time.
And I understand with that speaker, you achieved a certain high level of performance, even within Dolby standards.
Yeah, we were able to actually best their requirements, and
meaning hit the top.
Yeah, like it's if you look at the required frequency response for that speaker, ours is pretty much exactly the way they wanted it.
Okay, well, thank you very much.
Thanks.
Okay, Paul, so I have some questions for you that came in. And this first one is something I figured somebody would write. Bam Studio 69 asks, what's the favorite speaker you've designed, now or in the past?
Well, let me pick two of them.
Okay.
Not just one. I really have a lot of affection for the work and the spirit of doing something really challenging when I first started PSB. And that is what we talked about a minute ago, and that's the Beta 2.
Okay.
That to me was really putting PSB into another league. And as we developed the company, it's something we really enjoyed being a part of, and that is a world-class product.
Right.
And, you know, that was a world-class product because it brought to PSB some notoriety in terms of technology.
And what year are we talking?
I designed the first Beta 2 in 1973.
Okay.
So it's 49 years ago.
Right.
I guess the other favorite is, and we talked a bit about this DNA that PSB has been using for quite some time, and that's this transitional design. And this is my best effort in that regard.
The T600.
Yeah, I was able to use some pretty sophisticated optimization software to do this, and this is the first time I executed a design using this high technology software that allows me to dive into it on a granular level better than ever before.
So we're talking a speaker from 49 years ago and a speaker today.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And this really earmarks everything I've learned about loudspeaker design, and every aspect of it reflects what I've learned and what I've been taught by all my experiences in loudspeaker design.
Okay. Now, J.O. asks, now I know sister company Blue Sound does this, but asks, has PSB ever explored the idea of portable or Bluetooth speakers, PSB itself?
Well, we don't have a portable, but we do have Bluetooth speakers. We have
one?
the AM5 and the AM3,
okay,
self-powered speakers, and they're actually a complete system on their own. They have several inputs.
But never a single speaker type of an all-in-one speaker system under the PSB brand?
Not under the PSB brand.
Any future plans?
Well, streaming and all of these technologies that integrate with music reproduction are definitely the future for any company who builds loudspeakers. Like we share in that common resource because of the Lembrook umbrella, where NAD, Blue Sound, and PSB are all within one group.
Yep.
There's a lot of shared technologies and ideas and resources that really migrate into all the brands.
Okay, well,
and you're going to see a lot more of that in the future.
And this is a related question from Jeff Bechtold. It seems like the world is moving towards active speakers to appeal to people who want great sound quality with simplicity. What do you see as the benefits and drawbacks of the active speaker approach? And an active speaker is fully amplified, line level crossover, could be DSP active, so the fully active speaker. And I think you've experimented with that in the past.
Oh, absolutely. Like we make a fully active speaker at the entry level with the Alpha series, the AM3 and AM5, and we do powered subwoofers that are active. One of the beauties of having a system which is what I call a closed system. It doesn't require any other auxiliary things to make it work. And what happens in that case, as the engineer, I control all aspects of the sound reproduction.
Amplification, crossover, the whole thing.
Yeah,
You're not left to chance.
Any processing that might go on because of the digital technologies. We put things like, and they're fun, they're enjoyable, and things like spatializers where you can make the speaker system sound much more enveloping. And going forward, there's even going to be more aspects of two-channel reproduction that can create a sound stage and an acoustical event that sounds more and more real. So these are things that I'm excited about going forward.
So I think it's safe to say in the future.
Definitely, in not too distant future, I would say.
Okay. Jeff Fritz asks, I know PSB is all about value and would never venture into super expensive speakers, or would they? But he asked, but will PSB ever build a world-beating $15,000 and up per pair set of speakers? Are you interested in that realm?
Well, as time goes on, I mean, when I first designed our first flagship, which was the Project B2, it was relatively expensive in its day, but you know, it was only $1,500 a pair.
But we're talking what,
That was in 1980.
Yeah,
and
the
so,
tower one, yep.
So we will always present value, but as the market grows and the technologies improve, and the sonic expectation of the end user as they evolve and mature in their appreciation of sound reproduction, I see us getting into the areas where those prices still represent good value.
Yeah.
I mean, we won't deviate from that, but it doesn't mean that we won't produce speakers that aspire to that level of performance.
Would you put these up against speakers that are $15,000, $20,000, $30,000?
When you get into that price range, you're really dealing with small differences that you pay a very large amount of money for. So there will be thresholds where PSB will get to a point where we say that threshold is worth the extra money by putting it into it.
Okay. Now this is an interesting question. John Kutatz asks, Roy Allison designed speakers for particular room placements. Is it frustrating for you to have the customer's room and speaker location be completely unknown while you are designing? And I know all the NRC research in that was about speakers and rooms.
Yeah, the system you're listening to is not just the speaker. It's the speaker and the environment's acoustics. And so they couple together to give you the acoustical event that you're trying to reproduce. And as far as the recreating that acoustical event, not many, like Allison believed the woofers were close to the floor, and he always designed to be in the corner, so you could always predict within a given room better what the acoustical event the listener would hear. Right. In today's world, that's unrealistic to think that people will always put the speaker in a specific place. So there's a lot of places that you can investigate if you're having issues with acoustics in your room.
But I think one of the hallmarks from the NRC studies is controlling the dispersion of the speaker so it integrates well with most rooms.
Yeah, at low frequencies that's hard to do, but in the mids and highs, you have to think that when a speaker produces sound, the sound you hear, there are three aspects to the sound you hear. The first sound is directly from the loudspeaker.
The speaker right to the listener.
Right to the listener. And that's what you measure when you're in the anechoic chamber. You're only measuring one discrete angle. The second sounds you hear are what we call early reflections: the floor, the side wall, the ceiling, the back wall.
One bounce usually, like off the floor.
One reflection.
Yeah.
Okay, so you can separate all of those things measure-wise and analyze them. And I'm going to give kind of a long-winded explanation to this because I think it's important for a lot of people to understand. You know, you can have two speakers that have a flat frequency response on axis.
Just directly.
And it looks good on paper, but they sound completely different. And part of the reason is what I'm talking about here, and that is the direct sound, the early reflections, and what we call the reverberant sound. It doesn't come directly to you. It sort of rattles around the room for a while before it gets to you. And those three components are what you hear when you're listening to loudspeakers. And we as human beings tend to integrate in time those acoustical events. And let me explain maybe and clarify a little bit. When you're listening to someone who's on a speakerphone, and can you tell they're on a speakerphone?
Yes.
Yeah. And the reason you can tell is probably your answer would be reverb in the room. You can hear the room's reverberation.
Discreetly the reverb.
The reverb. And my question to most people, or when I pose this situation, my question is, how do you, when you're in that room, do you hear that echo or that reverb? And the answer is usually, well, no. Well, the reason is you have two ears, and the speakerphone only has one ear. It has one microphone. So it can't discern arrival times and delays and calculations the brain is doing to make that acoustical event sound like one acoustical event, even though there's several things going on at the same time. I think it's part of our survival as we evolve, because if you can locate sounds without this distraction of all the reflections, so our brain is always integrating those things. And, you know, so when you're listening to a loudspeaker in a room, the first period of time, the early reflections in particular, actually get integrated with the sound that you hear. And the timbre of that sound that you hear is what you hear as timbre, the tone and the balance of the sound. So if the speaker off axis between one model and another are completely different, say the designer decided to use an 8-inch two-way and he crossed it over at 3 kilohertz, well, that 8-inch woofer off axis isn't doing very much.
And that's why the speaker in the room, and Floyd Toole's got a great book about that.
Oh yeah.
Is so crucial.
The room, and let me just say something that people can experiment with. There are 3 components to what you hear in a room. One is the woofer, or the speaker, the low frequency of the speaker is what we're talking about here, where it is with respect to the boundaries, where you are with respect to the speaker, and then where you are with respect to the boundaries. You vary those 3 things in a room, and you can find setups that are actually better than other setups. And
play with your speaker.
Play with them. And you know, in the case of this speaker, we even supply port plugs. And the left side of your room might not be the same as the right side. And just experiment by plugging ports and changing it to better adapt or better be balanced for your particular room.
Okay, that's really interesting.
That was long-winded, sorry about that.
Somebody asked in the questions, and it's more a question for marketing, is there going to be memorabilia from this event? And that's really a question for marketing.
Yeah.
50th anniversary, I think there should be.
Yeah, and maybe what I'll do is if there is, I'll sign them all before we send them out.
Well, you might have committed to that. You did that on a speaker. People will see that in the documentary. So though it's not memorabilia, we're going to go to June now, who is going to announce the winners who entered for PSB and other products.
Welcome back, and we're excited now to be able to draw winners for some of the door prizes, and we've got some really exciting things coming up from PSB Speakers, Blue Sound, and ISO Acoustics. So our very first prize is a pair of PSB Alpha AM3 powered bookshelf speakers, and the winner is Michael Scott from Canada. Congratulations. Our next prize is a pair of CS500 Universal Indoor-Outdoor speakers. And the winner is, thank you, Richard Geary from the United States. Congratulations. Our next prize from our friends at Blue Sound is a Blue Sound Pulse Mini compact wireless multi-room music streaming speaker. And the winner is John Zick from Australia. Our next prize is from Isoacoustics. It's a pair of Aperta isolation speaker stands. And the winner is Andrew Perfecki from Canada. And our very last door prize is a set of 8 Aurea isolation feet, again from our friends at Isoacoustic. The winner is Peter Calderwood from the United States. Calderwood from the United States. And as some of you may know, we had an Instagram contest right before this program where you had to share a photo of your PSB system with the hashtag PSB 50. Up for grabs were 3 pairs of M4U8 Mark II wireless noise canceling headphones. And the winners are at vinyl.ness, at peter.cawthorne, and at paulrobinson0013. Congratulations, everyone. For all of our winners, we'll be contacting you after the program to ensure that you guys get your prizes. For those of you who weren't lucky enough to win, we do have a discount code, BASH10, and that will give you 10% off any purchases from the PSB website through to the end of the annual year, the calendar year, I guess you could say. And you can use that in conjunction with any other of our programs. So congratulations again to our winners, and hopefully those that were not lucky enough to win, you guys can take advantage of that discount code that's specially created just for the attendees of this event.
So Paul, we have everyone here. It's been 50 years of PSB, the company that started in 1972. What does that mean to the brand and to you?
Well, at this point, when I first started PSB, I wasn't thinking in terms of doing this for 50 years, but I'm pretty excited about what's coming up, what we have now, and where PSB is going to go. And I have no intentions of changing the path that I'm on right now, and that is to design and make loudspeakers.
Are you surprised you made 50 years?
You know, I'm a bit surprised. I'm surprised that I have the drive and the energy still to continue doing what I do.
And it's true. I see him at NRC all the time.
Yeah. And it's a lifestyle that I've enjoyed, and to top it off, it's been all about music, which is why I did this originally.
Well, you've made a tremendous contribution to hi-fi audio, inspired people, and to people who have bought your speakers and will look at your speakers in the future. So
Yep.
Congratulations.
Well, thank you very much.
So I want to thank you for watching. I want to say that you need to watch the PSB social channels. There'll be a special announcement on July 1st. You want to keep tabs on that. And I also want to tell you to watch the documentary that is going to follow right now. You'll be the first people to see the documentary. It won't be available for 24 hours still. So if you want to watch it now, it's 23 minutes long. I highly encourage you to. It's about PSB and it's exceptionally well done. Thank you very much.
My name is Paul Barton, and I'm the chief designer and founder of PSB Speakers. Well, music has always been a fundamental part of my life and started at a very early age. My father was an avid musician. He was a very well-accomplished tenor in our area. When I was young, I would go to these rehearsals and really got an understanding of that whole world of music. Well, he was a perfectionist, no question about it. My father enrolled me in the string program. He realized that as I was getting a little bit bigger, at some point I'm going to have to get a full-size violin. He did purchase a violin in a case. It turned out the violin was not what he expected. It wasn't well made. He decided, well, I think I'm going to build a violin. He'd never done anything like it before. Well, what I really started to appreciate was the art of woodworking. How you can just take a block of wood and turn this into this beautiful sculpture. When he finished the violin, there are adjustments you can make. So I would play all the strings and try and get the sound to be balanced. I started to become kind of acquainted with listening for differences in sounds and that sort of thing. I was entered into a competition. I played against 20, 21-year-olds, and I was 11 years old. I not only won the contest, but I got the highest mark ever awarded. Well, it did teach me to be detailed and do the best I can. You know, that was obviously what I saw my dad do. In parallel with all of that, I had a knack for taking things apart and putting things back together. So that was really the beginnings of all my interest in modifying and adding my own twist to these things. And, you know, as I went through high school, I got a job at a hi-fi store. And I decided to start building kits, loudspeakers that I could sell in the store. The university students, when they got their student loan, they would spend all their money on hi-fi. Students could build their speakers in their dorm with my kits.
For people who came of age in the 1950s, what most of them wanted when they had little money of their own in their pockets was their first car. Starting in the mid-60s, I think that shifted to a good stereo.
You know, eventually I started needing help to get these kits ready. Two high school buddies of mine, Klaus Borchardt and Walter Herman, they became kind of interested in what I was doing. So Klaus, Walter, and I started PSB the summer of '72. We rented a space out in a little town just north of Kitchener-Waterloo called St. Jacobs. So it was a really quaint place to start a company. We were in an old shoe factory. Because of my interest in loudspeakers, I decided to apply to the University of Waterloo. So I'd leave university at around 5 o'clock and I'd drive out to the factory. Time for me was just working and sleeping. Of course, back in those days, I would just pile the speakers in my car, drive to a town. I would just walk in with speakers cold, say, I'm Paul Barton, I make speakers, do you want to have a listen?
One day, this guy walked into my shop. I didn't know who he was, and I'd never heard of PSB, and I'd never heard of Paul Barton. But he came in and sort of said, you know, I make loudspeakers. You know, we set them up, we listened to them, and I went, whoa, I don't have anything this good in my shop.
Well, in 1973, I designed two models, the Avante and the Beta 2. Well, the Avante was a two-way 8-inch with a 1-inch dome tweeter. What was unique about it is I started using a technique by putting felt around the tweeter. And by putting felt around the tweeter, it tended to reduce the amount of energy moving across the baffle. Well, the Beta 2 is one of the most significant products, even though it was in the early stages of PSB. This speaker was a servo feedback speaker. It's the first speaker we produced where we had electronics inside the loudspeaker. This type of design is still actively used today. Spurred from my experiences and a love for woodworking and watching my dad build the violin, this beveled edge mitered on the corner became sort of PSB's industrial design. The fact that I was using feedback, this was kind of a new approach to designing loudspeakers. Dr. Floyd Toole was interested in the technology that we had used here. It was really the catalyst that got me introduced at the National Research Council.
Paul, I call him the grandfather of the Canadian loudspeaker industry because in 1973, he got introduced to Floyd Toole at NRC.
Arrangements were made. I drove to Ottawa. I never looked back since.
The National Research Council was started in 1916, and the purpose of NRC was to help Canadian industry and technology compete around the world.
They had a big anechoic chamber and tremendous testing facilities, and it allowed a small company without a lot of resources, like PSB at the time, to compete on the world stage.
The anechoic chamber is very useful in dissecting how the speaker is performing so that you can interpret how it behaves.
What the NRC did was systematized the relationship between measured behavior of a loudspeaker and how satisfied listeners were with the sound of that loudspeaker. So through a combination of loudspeaker measurements and blind listener tests where listeners weren't aware of what they were hearing, That research identified the key characteristics that a speaker has to have. Flat, even amplitude response on axis, off-axis response that mirrored on-axis response, and freedom from distortion.
So it was kind of a secret sauce. He was able to create these speakers at a price point which was quite significantly less than everybody else.
And imagine me going into this community of scientists, PhDs, who allowed me to sit with them and listen to what they had to say. They were just so accommodating, so helpful. This is the Passive 2, which was the top of the line product. This speaker has quite a history. In conjunction with all the NRC research that I had been doing, the CBC were in pursuit of recommendations on deciding what a universal monitor would be like. This product here was one of the few that were chosen to be used by the CBC.
I remember when the PSB Passive 2 first came out, it was a big wall of sound, but also with refined detail.
This was really the starting point of producing good value loudspeakers that had high performance.
The Passive 2 just went like crazy. We sold so many of those speakers. Paul's ability to create a tremendous high-end sounding product for less than half of what was really out in the market.
PSB's Project B2 is one of the most iconic hi-fi products I don't think many people know about.
This was really a turning point for PSB, put us into another league, so to speak.
What's become a hallmark of PSB is the idea of putting the mid-range or woofer over the tweeter. This is the first PSB to have this.
I mean, it's a high frequency, so let's put it up high. I think that's the logic that people had when they were doing tweeter woofer designs. If I had the tweeter up on top and I looked below the speaker, it was much flatter than if I looked above the speaker. So I'm thinking, why don't I just put the tweeter below the woofer? Problem solved.
Not only do the wings serve an acoustic point, they help with diffraction, they conceal the cabinet and they give the thing a more elegant look. And another reason this is an important speaker in PSB's history is because it was the last speaker before he partnered with Lenbrook.
At the time, British speakers were big and American speakers were big, and they had kind of a signature sound. The American speakers were, a little bit more bass heavy, and the British speakers were a little bit more refined. It was a different sort of style of sound.
My name's Gord Simmons, and I'm the president and CEO of the Lenbrook Group of Companies. Because the American brands and the British brands were driving things, our focus was there. Everything was about import right through the late 70s and into the early 80s.
PSB was Canadian. And it was interesting because it kind of fit in the middle. It wasn't the American sound, it wasn't the British sound, it was quite distinct, but it was very natural.
Developing products that could be proven scientifically, it really helped the Canadian brands start to leapfrog this really subjective, almost black magic art of loudspeaker design. The early 80s was a really interesting time. The Canadian dollar was really weak, so being an importer became really expensive. Made in Canada made great sense economically.
Mark Stone contacted me on behalf of Gord Simmons' request to see if I was interested in having a discussion about the future of PSB. The rest is history.
It was really a serendipitous situation where the brand needed a sponsor, and we were well capitalized. Didn't take very long to say, yeah, this is a perfect match.
And so I never looked back. Lenbrook took PSB under their wing, and I was able to continue doing the things I do best, which is conceive the product, design it, and promote it.
This is the 40R. This was the first series that came out after the acquisition.
My wife and I would work together. We would sit at our kitchen table, and I would sign every one of these by hand.
So what he did was design the grill. It's actually chamfered here. When it's attached, it actually produces a smooth surface for the tweeter to output.
I actually put a radius on here. It's not a sharp edge. This radius in conjunction with this slight bevel really creates a topology around the tweeter that minimizes diffraction as well.
This is what really sets apart PSB, that deep understanding of the physics of sound reproduction.
With the association with Lembrick, who are one of the best distributors in Canada, really PSB could almost parachute into already a well-organized and well-structured distribution network.
People were talking about this Canadian sound and this Canadian speaker design. And so for us, it was time to start to look south of the border. It wasn't easy, it was tough work, but we just kept at that. You know, we went from 0 dealers in the United States to around 250.
So this is the Atom. This is another 80s era PSB speaker. Now, PSB's always been about high value, reasonable price, and they've always had the engineering resources. Now there's the sheer scale of being associated with a large company that allowed a design to really go down in price and up in performance.
I didn't compromise on the drivers or the performance of the system. I just compromised on a little bit of the aesthetics.
We saw that it was time to start to look to Asia, start to look to Europe. You know, they really saw the story and they believed in all of the things that the National Research Council was bringing into this mature loudspeaker industry.
The definitive moment for me was the introduction of the Stratus Gold. And I remember that Audio Magazine review with the picture of the Stratus in the cover. They called it the 10,000 watt speaker. It was just heft and authority.
You can see that PSB went big. This is a large tower speaker, the kind of which PSB really never had before.
An easy speaker to listen to, but also a very exciting, involving speaker to listen to.
This speaker actually created a bit of a problem at SoundStage because we had a reviewer with a pair and nothing measured up to them.
You would get people come into the shop and say, you know, what's new? What's Paul done that's new lately? Because he would come up with surprises. Like the PSB Alpha was a big surprise, so who expected that?
The spirit of the PSB Atom migrated into what became very famous for PSB, the Alpha series.
Now, the Alpha series came out when people were really big into home theaters.
The press really took to this speaker. We're talking about magazines that review products that are $5,000, $10,000. And I remember the Alpha made it to the cover of that magazine, which kind of blew us away because I think it was $199 a pair. Nothing could compete with that speaker.
Well, we call this the Synchrony. It became our flagship after the Stratus Gold.
You can see it in the look. They really stepped up the industrial design. Visually, it became a really refined product.
This speaker was really amalgamating all of the things on the other models and just taking it into the next level of performance.
The Imagine T3 takes the Synchrony line and kind of ups the game. The innovation that came in here are the footers. It was when Paul started looking at the performance of the loudspeaker, not just in the room, but how it behaves on the floor. Would it make the floor into a sounding board? Would that distort the sound?
So by coupling it to the floor becomes part of the mass of the loudspeaker and its inability to vibrate if excited. You'll notice on all our tweeters, there's a little device that's sitting on front of the dome. What this does is discourages any interference off axis that occurs if the dome is completely open.
I remember when the Imagine T3 came out, High End Press did a whole rating of loudspeakers, and the T3 was in there, and it was literally a tenth of the price of some of those really expensive high-end speakers. And that kind of creates this cult following.
Paul, being around for so long, he's really been part of the family. When you focus in on what Paul's actually doing, he's not only enjoying the music, he's activating a different section of his brain. And I think that's one thing that I've really picked up from him, is to be able to say, okay, what is actually going on right here? How much of this is coming from the song, the music, and how much of this effect is from the actual product itself?
Part of PSB's future is the trend for people to want to take the high fidelity experience with them on the road.
This is the PSB M4U. It was a really well thought out design in this way because Paul Barton travels a lot.
Really is a benchmark product for PSB in that it was the first pursuit of sound reproduction using headphones.
A big part of what Paul was striving to achieve on headphone design was to kind of get rid of this effect that you get with headphones, which is like you're stuck in your head.
One of the things that makes these headphones sound good and quite natural is what PSB calls room feel. What does a speaker have to be designed like to behave properly in a room? And a lot of it was established with what was called the Athena Project.
I didn't realize at the time that what we had learned about what a speaker should sound like in a room, which was the thrust of the Athena Project, actually can apply to headphones.
So when you take a speaker and you put it in the room, at low frequencies, the room starts contributing to the sound. It increases the bass.
Let's just apply that curve or that target function to headphones. Boom, makes the headphone have the same balance and timbre that that musical event has when you put it on speakers in a room.
This is the Synchrony T600. So it really represents the culmination of everything that's gone on here since 1972.
Materials we use are always sort of based on what the state of the art is. And by using carbon fiber, in conjunction with the proper type of dust cap, produces a driver that just takes performance just up another notch.
PSB, I think, is a brand that in all their products want to get the essential things right. It's led to great reviews. I think it's led to a lot of brand loyalty.
The thing that really appealed to me about PSB was its musicality. Nothing artificial, nothing hyped up. A lot of companies would put what we call a smile curve on the speaker, so it would boost it in the bass and boost it in the highs. And it sounded kind of impressive at first, but when you listen to it for a while, you realize it really wasn't natural.
It would be like looking through a glass to a beautiful, colorful spring landscape, but you put a yellow tint on the glass, so you see the world through this filter. And we, as speaker designers, want our speakers to be clear glass through which you see the original acoustical event.
And that was Paul's thing. You know, he was a musician. He was out to make a natural sounding speaker. It's not an accident.
You know, one of the things that I always marvel at is just the strength of the relationship between Paul, PSB, and the world's critical hi-fi press. There's so much to talk about with PSB in terms of its history.
The legacy of PSB, I think, is going to continue and do very well going forward because of the values that really are incorporated in the company in its very core.
PSB obviously has a really important part in the center of our strategy. We're building a stable of premium audio brands, and PSB is right in the core of that. It was our first and continues to be a brand that we're driving.
The things that change are technologies. The things that change are, market interests. But the fundamentals of who PSB is as a brand, those aren't going to change.
Value has always been a strong forte for PSB, and that comes from sort of my roots, I guess. I really enjoy people going, wow, is that all it costs? That means I've done my job.
You know, where we're going from a point of view of marketing PSB today is really reaching out to this new consumer, and authenticity and integrity seem to be really important, and no company that I know of can claim that any stronger than PSB.
When someone hears a PSB product, they know they're listening to a PSB product, from the flagship models right through to the lowest price models.
Paul always said to me, I like to make speakers for real people. And real people are people who can afford them.
Like a family. People love the brand, they love the products, they talk about it to their friends, and it goes from generation to generation.
It's something I've learned from Paul over the years. Really always keeping my ear open for the next thing. Basically, we're not resting on our laurels when it comes to product design. We can carry that legacy of innovation into the future.
PSB has set the stage for young up-and-comers to take that ball, which is a very robust ball, and go with it.
Those characteristics and those values that Paul has as a person, which are foundational to the whole brand, have been passed on now to a new generation. There's now a full team of people. It's not just Paul.
I think PSB has a lot of potential to grow. Seeing PSB take its rightful place amongst, the top 5 to 10 brands in the history of hi-fi, I think PSB has every potential to have that position. To see Paul smile and say, yeah, this is going to get carried on well beyond my time as a loudspeaker designer, I think that's what drives me every day.
Yeah, well, I like to think of people who listen to PSBs stop listening to speakers and just listen to the music. The end goal is the music. That's really where you've made it. Experiencing the music as opposed to listening. Music is something that does something to me that nothing else does. I can't describe it in any other way. And I can only assume that happens to other people. And if I can do that to other people, I'm doing my job.